Yeah, I think that philosophy gives people, it honors, I think, their autonomy as people, and gives them a chance to empower themselves. I mean, I think that at its best, philosophy can be a really powerful source of human solidarity, right? Because I think that the things that we try to engage as philosophers, or try to engage when we're being philosophical, are things that mostly we share. Right, not everyone, right, and the problems take different forms. The problem of I don't know, a gay or lesbian person coming out is not the same quite as changing your political views or something like that. But it's in the same family. Questions about identity and your place in the world and so on. So I think what I hope that philosophy can give people is not necessarily or always good answers to their questions. Sometimes I think maybe the good answers are kind of elusive. Right. But what I think it can do is it can make them feel that the problems are not theirs alone, right? That we're working through kind of the muddle of human existence together, and that there is a long tradition, right, of people trying to figure these things out people who bother to put pen to paper. Right. The canonical philosophers. Most philosophy, again, I think is done by sort of non-academics, again, kind of as they're in the shower or as they're driving or whatever. And so it does end up on paper, which is kind of unfortunate, but, I think it can be a really powerful source, again, of alleviating our sense that we're alone in the world, or that our problems are unique to ourselves.
All right. Well, philosophize, talk to people, and keep philosophizing.
Yeah, that's right.
So, in that regard too, I think you hit on an interesting paradox with some things of like knowledge and just academia of trying to get out like information in general. And so, one of the things like language is so funny, because it's like when you were talking about that people are doing it in their car, but they just maybe not know the moniker of like, hey, this is Kantian ethics, or this is labeling and stuff. And an academic maybe just can put that like paste-it note, that little P-touch, right there. Hey, this is this, kind of deal. And most people just don't know.
That's flattering to people. I mean, I've found that students, in my experience, when you tell them that a certain insight of theirs or a certain idea of theirs has a background in or sort of resonates with views of Plato or whatever great philosopher it is, it's very flattering, right? Because I think it sort of suggests, I can discover things.
Just
right?
like you said,
I'm not completely powerless or helpless in the face of whatever problem or challenge I might be facing. That's, of course, to point out that originality is in very short supply in philosophy. It's really hard to be original, but I also think it's a good thing to discover that you're not. Right? And even now, I don't know, 20 or more years into my own career, it's I think still very kind of thrilling, right? When you read another philosopher, contemporary or canonical, and you see them expressing, thoughts or ideas that are similar to ones you've had yourself, right?
Oh, that was my rabbit hole and all.
There's this kind of a sense of, there is something, credible, right? Intelligible, coherent about my own way of seeing things, and somebody else has been there,
seeing
before.
It as well,
and again, I think just the sense of alleviating our feeling that we're kind of working our way through human existence on our own. That's one of the really powerful things, I think philosophy can do for people. I think, I've had the good fortune of seeing at my current institution at Cal Poly, students really forming communities, that are grounded, I think, in sharing a kind of philosophical temperament.
Right.
Wanting to talk to one another about ideas.
Right. And ideas, that's a great. Well, but some of these ideas, like you mentioned, are thousands of years old. Aristotelian philosophy of, hey, the only thing I know is I know nothing. I'm no one's teacher, really. But at the same time, you're Aristotle. Like what? But and then the second thing, exactly. But the second thing is we kind of want to hark on is. Philosophia is actually not wisdom in per se, but again the love of of wisdom,
Yeah.
and actually trying to, the journey per se, not exactly, well, I mean, there's different interpretations of language, etc., but like not exactly ever attaining knowledge or wisdom or whatever, but always striving to do it. And that goes into the myth of Sisyphus, etc., but,
Yeah,
sorry.
there's always a question, I think, of why should I have a job? Which is broadly speaking, right? What is it that I purportedly know that I suppose the proverbial person on the street doesn't know? And it's not, I think, sort of the right answers to things. I think it's knowing traditions, knowing the ways in which different philosophical schools of thought, different philosophers have engaged with each other, what strengths and weaknesses they've seen in each other's points of view. So it's there's a phrase that I've heard people use that I think is very helpful, that philosophers are kind of like intellectual cartographers.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
Sort of you figure out what the lay of the land looks like. You don't necessarily know what the best place to be on the map is, but you know what's on the map, and you know how to get from one point to another. I think that's an apt analogy.
Right. But then if I were to take you and push you on that, is there ever a time that we'll get to the satellite then view? Because then it's like,
I think some of my views are right.
Of course. Well, I mean, that can be proved over time, and obviously more so than that. But like the cartographer, I like that because you're in it. You're trying to figure it out.
Right, and I think the other thing that I like also about the cartography analogy is that you can do a map at different levels of detail. Right, I can map the galaxy, or I can map the space outside this building. And I think philosophers, at their best, work above it, sort of above and below, right? They work both at very high levels of abstraction sometimes, but also work down at very close levels of detail. But I think what we get over philosophy is we get over time is a better sense of the strengths and weaknesses of different views.
Yes.
I also think there's, in some areas of philosophy, I can't speak to all of them, but at least in the areas that I know well, I think there is over time, some convergence on, again, what the strengths and weaknesses of different views are. I think some views become seen as more credible, some views become seen as less credible, which doesn't mean we exactly refute the less credible views, or we demonstrate, beyond any doubt, the more credible ones. But I think that, over time, we sift through them.
Right, it's more like we just kind of get attracted to the better ideas over time. I mean, not necessarily better.
So.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Yeah, as well.
But I think we sift through them, and we sort of have a sense of which views sort of are more meritorious. Which, of course, I don't think philosophy is supplied with lots and lots of knockdown arguments that prove things beyond the pale. Right. But I think we do have a sense of better and worse views over time. I also think we over time map out more of the logical possibilities. Right. We figure out more of which views are available to us. And so in ethics, there are people who begin with certain historical figures, say someone like Kant, but then they develop that thought and modify it, and perhaps delete certain things that maybe Kant himself held. Yeah. So I think that we get a greater diversity of views. We sort of see what the points of contact are among different views. I think we have a more crystalline sense of where our disagreements reside.
Okay, Michael, and then moving forward through some types of language with philosophy and talking with this is we got connected on Twitter, and it's really interesting to see that there's different platform or different groups that are using that platform: philosophy Twitter, SciComm, Econ Twitter. So what has that been to basically maybe democratize the message, if you will, of some of the expertise of philosophy that we were just talking about, from academics to people who are just interested, or laymen's,
Boy, it's a troubled subject, honestly. I don't think philosophy is done well on social media, which doesn't mean that there aren't maybe a few people who do it well, but I don't think it's a medium that's especially well suited to philosophic exchange, and so I actually tend not to do philosophy on Twitter. I publicize, what I'm doing, and in some cases maybe reach out to others about different kinds of collaborations, or just sort of share, items that I think are of interest. But I don't tend to actually try to philosophize on social media. I'm not an expert kind of on the sort of technical ecology of social media, I guess you could say, but it does feel to me as if In the Republic, Plato is very skeptical about artists, and the ways in which they are at one remove from reality. He thinks that they just sort of reproduce things. And I don't share that view, but I think there's something he's right about, which is that I think philosophy is done best face to face.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is because as embodied creatures, I think when we interact together in the same space, not the same virtual space, the same space, I think we are more sympathetic to one another. And I think we have a better sense of discursive dynamics. We know sort of what to say, what not to say. I've rarely seen, during the time social media has been prominent in academia, what's that, maybe 10, 12 years now, I've rarely seen a sort of lot of kind of lightning bolt moments of philosophical insight on traditional social media. The blogs can be interesting. I find that to be a little bit ponderous for my own tastes, but I think that it's not a great medium, right? I think for understanding one another. It's got all of the features that I think tend to help us misunderstand.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when I think about teaching, students, teaching philosophy students, well, what am I trying to teach them, or what am I trying to engender in them?
Right.
Well, I'm trying to engender in them patience. I'm trying to engender in them a kind of guarded skepticism toward what they hear, but also a kind of charity toward what they hear. And so I think all of the kinds of intellectual virtues that I think we're trying to instill in students, not just in philosophy, but I think kind of in academic life in general, they're very hard to cultivate on Twitter or on social media.
No,
it's the least hospitable environment that I can think of for those kinds of aptitudes and attitudes.
Yeah, I think it really harkens back to the medium as the message of Marshall McLuhan. It really depends on what you're trying to do. If you can make little, bits, of 280 characters, and you want to say something, okay, that's cool. Or you want to thread things together. That's what I've been kind of working on in my own stuff. But then, as you said, even going up to blogs or articles, and then going up to peer-reviewed, and then going up to books. I mean, there's a big progression of things, and that's only in print. We're not even talking about these mediums like talking, video.
Yeah, I would say, in the case of something like Twitter, and to a lesser extent, Facebook, it seems to me that a lot of the environment there is sort of intellectual one-liners.
Yes, I like that.
And that's fine, right? I have no problem with that.
It has a place.
Some of them are kind of entertaining, but I think they're kind of designed or intended to put an end, right, to a kind of conversation. And I don't see as much on social media that really is aimed at inviting a conversation and inviting a kind of careful, slow. I think that's the other thing to say, right? It's mediums that value speed.
Yep.
Right. I don't think there are many conversations that are designed to invite slow, deliberate, self-skeptical reactions, right? I think one of the things that philosophy should train you to be is to be a little bit skeptical about your own patterns of thought.
Yeah, baloney detection kit, Carl Sagan.
Baloney detection kit. Yeah. So, as I said, I just don't think that they're particularly good for the kinds of intellectual virtues that philosophy at its best manifests. Now, as far as peer-reviewed research goes, I think the electronic revolution has been very good, right, in the sense that it sort of puts a lot of this information at people's disposal. That system is, as a system of labor and exchange, completely broken.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of that for access.
It's increased access, but it involves huge amounts of uncompensated labor and a business model that, the critics, I agree essentially with the critics that it amounts to a kind of extraction of labor without compensation to people like me.
Yeah, and just as broad strokes is basically there's an issue of in scientific journals is that peer review. Basically, when you go through that process, you have an increased thing of legitimacy. Everything's great, but at the same time, a lot of that funding or whatever is coming through taxpayer dollars, possibly, et cetera. And then that access is not even open. So maybe not in philosophy, but just in the sense, the grand thing of academia and peer reviewed is just, it's broken, like you said.
Well, right. I think one kind of blunt way to put it, right?
Yeah.
To invoke, a phrase from J.S. Mill, right? Is that, you can't really have a marketplace of ideas if you have some people trying to monopolize the marketplace, right? Or trying to make money off of it, right? Which, commercial publishers, that's their business model.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, sort of rent seeking on the production of peer-reviewed research.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I am very glad to do peer review because I learn a lot from it, and it's an important obligation in the field, and it's been very good for me. I mean, without it, I suspect I would not have had as anywhere near as successful or as high profile a career as I've had. But the business model definitely leaves a lot to be desired.